This week on the WriterCon podcast.
If you decide that you're going to go ahead and write the story, think about why you want to write the story and what it means. And for example, with my story, I wrote down a little note that said, if I don't tell this story, who will?
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, bestselling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Rene Gutteridge, bestselling author of over 30 novels and screenplays.
One of the most fun parts of WriterCon, not just the big annual conference, but the retreat, the cruise, really all of it, is that we get to work with the best people in all stages of their careers. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had Susan Meisner on this podcast, and next week, we'll be talking to Lisa Gardner. So there's two of the most successful best-selling writers in the world. And on this podcast, we're talking to someone who is actually starting on their journey, but who I predict is on her own path to writing excellence. Rene, if I made you pick, and really most of my questions on this show are about making people pick, right? If I made you pick, what are the three things or people most responsible for your really very impressive, I'm going to say huge, writing success?
Well, thank you. Well, I have to say my college professor, Terry Phelps, who I think was probably the first person to actually say, hey, kid, you have talent, you should do this. And worked with me a solid 4 years and after that to develop me as a writer. So shout out to Dr. Phelps at Oklahoma City University, who's still teaching there. And then I would say writers' conferences for sure, not even a question on that. And then as you were mentioning Susan Meisner and Lisa Gardner, Susan and I have known each other for years. In fact, we were thinking maybe it might be decades. And that's when you're getting old, when you can count the decades. But I remember taking walks with Susan at a conference we used to attend called Mount Hermon, and talking through writing problems, publishing problems, trying to get this and that and having meetings. And I distinctly remember brainstorming a story idea with Susan, and you fast forward and you're like, wow, Susan's now this, great bestseller. And that's where all these things started, these writers' conferences. It's where you begin these lifelong friendships of, you were both nobodies at one point, and you get to see people grow and do things. So, yeah. So I think, and then my writer friends. So that would be my third one of my group of writer friends who I've known for years and years that I can reach out to.
The best. Jesse, you've been to at least a couple of writer cons now and a cruise. Have you met anybody who really impressed you?
Well, listen,
present company accepted, of course.
Here's the thing. So, as someone who is not a writer, who's in a completely different field, it is amazing to be in it'd be like going to the Comic-Cons I go to and not being that kind of nerd, and just being able to talk to people without fanning over them, right? Yeah. And so I just love talking to creative people who are doing a creative thing, and so it's just been nice to be able to. People are just available to talk to at WriterCon. You can just walk right up to people and be like, hey, let's talk about your thing. And everyone's just available.
And people do.
And it's incredibly relaxing type of conference. Not for the people running it, obviously, that's exhausting. And I'm always usually running around doing something. But for everyone else, it seems very relaxing.
Yeah, well, that's why those chairs are out on the patio, right? So people can talk. All right, our interview today is with Janet Yeager. I've had the pleasure of knowing Janet for a while now because she regularly attended WriterCon and some of our other programs, and now it's paying off. Her debut novel, Brothers by Honor, will be released very shortly, and she signs at Magic City Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma on July 11th. The book launches a series, The Lakeshore Stories, set in Montana and Oklahoma. We will talk to Janet after the news segment and a brief word from our friends at Draft to Digital.
Hi, this is Kevin Tomlinson with Draft to Digital. Ebooks are amazing, but there's just something about having your book in print. That's why we built D2D Print. We take care of you with free layout templates and formatting, and we can convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound print cover automatically. Come check out D2D Print and all the cool tools we've built for you. Find out more at drafttodigital.com.
Well, it seemed there for a time that Amazon was the subject of every news story we did, and then they took a back bumper and no one complained. But because we always choose stories that we think are of interest and importance to authors, let's talk about Amazon once again, and particularly Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. That's their self-publishing unit, because they've rolled out major changes in book category selection. First, I'll tell you what that means, and then I'll tell you why that's important. Used to be what categories your book would be listed in came about two different ways. One, when you're uploading the data about the book, including metadata, you would pick 3 categories. But even after that time, you had the ability to email Amazon and request to be added to various categories, even if your book in that category bore a tangential at best relationship, which of course led to people looking for obscure categories that they could win, categories that had so little getting published that's popular there that you could get a number 1 and hope that nobody really looked at what the category was about. Well, it took like 15 years, but Amazon has twigged onto the problem, and now they're changing all that. Now you can pick your 3 categories right up front, and that's the end of the story. You'll never be able to change it, and there's nobody you can email to get stuff added to it. And actually, the initial reaction from the author community has been mostly positive, because the changes are thought to reduce abuse by authors who've been adding their books to arguably inappropriate categories just to increase their visibility, so they can be number 1. Jesse, could there come a day when we stop trying to game Amazon in one way or another to sell books?
No, there's the miscategorizing a thing is a problem on any sort of website that has search functions by category. And this is something I dealt with in a past job, where we as staff people had to approve, it was an event website, and we had to approve the categories they chose, because we knew people would take advantage of it to get into as many categories as possible. Right. So Amazon will keep trying to plug holes, and people will make new holes, and then Amazon will eventually try to plug those holes. So, well,
it is the goal of all concerned to actually sell books, right?
Yeah.
I suppose, Rene, are you fondly thinking nostalgically of the days when there was one bestseller list that anyone cared about, and you didn't have to pick a category? You were just there or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fascinating because, of course, Kindle, this was not around when I was really publishing. And so I was going through the traditional publishing route, even onto Amazon. But there was nothing worse than when you got a 1-star review for somebody who misunderstood what category your book was in. And, I thought this was a suspense, and they read the whole thing, and then they were mad, because they got the genre
just kept
wrong.
Waiting.
And they just, the whole way through, they were like, when was the body coming? So, Yeah. And then,
you make it a valid point, though. You're saying that basically, you might get the number one flag for a little while with this trick, but you may be impacting your ratings, how
and your
many
star
stars
reviews.
you've got on average, which is going to
Absolutely.
be more important in the long run.
Well, and sometimes, people just picked it up with their own, and they, I don't know if I was even in the right or wrong category. I didn't have anything to do with that, but man, they were sure mad, or, so I don't know. You can't erase those 1-star reviews, but I think people know when they're reading it, they're like, oh, they just read the wrong genre. They just move on. They don't hold it against you. Hopefully.
I would hope so. Yes. Okay. News story number 2. This is about Mary Trump and Jean Carroll in our continuing series of Authors Did What. They are collaborating on a novel, and it's not political, so I guess this isn't a political story. You know who I'm talking about, Mary Trump, the niece of our former president, Donald J. Trump, who has written a scathing book about him, really the whole family, and has appeared frequently in interviews saying less than positive things about Uncle Donald. Jean Carroll, of course, is the one who brought a civil suit against Trump alleging sexual harassment, sexual assault, actually, and defamation, and got a jury verdict of $5 million. And now they're working together on a book that has nothing to do with politics, they say, or the former president, or psychology, which would be Jean Carroll's field. The new book, called The Italian Lesson, is a romance novel about an American woman with a secret past who tries to reinvent herself in Tuscany, where she opens a cafe and meets a handsome local vineyard owner. I feel like I've already read this book, and all I've done is read this description. Anyway, they're going to release that on Substack, because that means that they can have subscribers and make a little money along the way, even before it's published in book form. They've also enlisted a third collaborator, Jennifer Taub, who is an actual published author and law professor and probable actual writer. But who knows? Jesse, anxious to read this book?
I mean, no, but I'm happy for both of them, though.
Yeah.
They deserve whatever money they can make from this. So it'd be interesting to see how the Substack model works, because I don't know how many authors have tried that yet. But but yeah, the book doesn't sound like it's breaking any new ground, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't be good. So
yes, absolutely right. Okay, Rene. Hypothetical. In my continuing series of Let's Pose Moral and Ethical Challenges that Rene has to deal with without any prior thought. So let's say Mary Trump and Jean Carroll came to you and wanted you to ghostwrite this book, because I'm pretty sure somebody is. Would you take the job?
Okay. Well, as I'm so good at doing, not answering the question, but answering the question. Okay, who's the genius in this is my question. And I'm looking at these three and I'm like, is it Jennifer Taub? Is she like, look, I have this really great story. Nobody's going to buy this. Who can I get to be on the cover with me that's going to stir up some attention? Which is, there's not even a cover because it's just on Substack. So I don't know. Like, this is the weirdest. As you were reading this, I was like having a very hard time following what was going on, because I thought this was going to be a nonfiction book. And then it's a novel. And then you threw in this third author, because they're not collaborating. It's the three of them. Right. Which, I mean, I'll be honest with you, that's a nightmare right there. And
that's too many cooks.
That's too many cooks in the kitchen. So I have a feeling there's one writer and two people who are getting paid to throw their name on it. But I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, hypotheticals. Although who knows, Mary Trump has produced a book
Yeah.
before, and Jean Carroll used to be or is an advice columnist, right? So
She
they
was,
have
yeah.
So is Mary Trump's is nonfiction though, right?
right. That was
Yeah.
like
And so nobody has written fiction here except
that's
for
true.
maybe Jennifer, but she's a
Right.
law professor. So are there
That
any
too,
fiction
yes.
writers in this?
As we
And
know,
lawyers
all
are
law-
renowned for their
all
exciting
lawyers,
writing
great
style.
fiction writers.
So yeah. So, but if you think about the three of them together, they actually make a really wonderful personality of a novelist. Like if you just took like psychologist and then Mary Trump and all of that,
Angry
and
niece
then
and
Jennifer, who's a law professor. I mean, I don't know. Like, let's see
could
what
be.
happens.
All right.
As we know, if it wants to sell, it needs to be spicy.
Spicy.
It better be spicy.
Right. Spicy romance. You're right.
Yeah.
We learned that on the cruise. All right, Jesse, I think it's time to cue up the music. Let's talk to Janet Yeager. Podcast.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Yeah, good to see you again. Hey, I bet you already know what I'm going to say because it's this first question every time. If you could give writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I would say that you should stick with if you decide that you're going to go ahead and write the story, think about why you want to write the story and what it means. And for example, with my story, I wrote down a little note that said, if I don't tell this story, who will? And so it was important that stories pop into your head for a variety of reasons, and sometimes there's a nugget that wants to be told or wants to be heard, and so that's part of it. So I would say listen to that voice, go ahead and don't be afraid to go ahead and just see where it takes you.
Sounds like good advice to me. Hey, congratulations on the publication of your first book.
Thank you.
A novel. How long have you been working on this?
Initially, the story started in 2015. Actually, it was a story that I grew up with, and it was about my father. And actually behind me, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a story about my father. And so I grew up with the story. And then in 2015, my family and I went on a family retreat, family reunion to Norway. And we went to a Norwegian resistance museum. And so I had gone with my kids and my husband, and found out that my father and his friends were actually in the museum and that it was a very well-known story. And then I found out that two of the people who were on this journey with my father were still alive. And so a year later, I went ahead and met with them. And so that was kind of the start of it. And so I wrote things down, didn't know what I was doing. I was a complete newbie. But then went to classes, went to WriterCon, went to various things, and suddenly the story started taking shape. And so it was a little bit of a journey, but I think it was worth it.
Well, okay, tell us real quick about the story. Give us an idea of what it's about.
Okay, so it takes place. It starts takes place in Norway. It starts right before the war, and then there's about 4 teenagers that one of whom is my father, is based on my father and his friends. But they are working for the Norwegian resistance. And so they are smuggling guns and munitions and propaganda through Nazi checkpoints. And the character Corey's half brother is a Nazi collaborator. And so he finds out what Corey and his friends are doing. And so they went ahead and he was going to go to the authorities. And so these teenagers stole a rowboat and decided to go ahead and row across the North Atlantic from Bergen, Norway to the Shetland Islands so that they could go ahead and continue their resistance efforts. And so the story started out as being an action adventure novel. But as I started writing it, it really became a story about friendships and what drove each of these characters to go ahead. And when the moment came that they all said, yes, we will go ahead and do this, we will all battle a storm, battle 250 miles in the North Atlantic in a 16-foot rowboat. So it's about friendship, it's about honor, it's about valor. So it's really two journeys in one.
Sounds like it took a lot of research.
It did. It was fun research. I got to go ahead. Like I said, I grew up with my father's side of the story, but I got to meet 3 out of the 4 main characters. And so they went ahead and they filled me in on information that I wasn't aware of. And so learning about them and what drove them to it and their place in the world and how they viewed where they were in their place in the world and how that related to how the friends and their families viewed their war efforts and the war in general, and going ahead and the resistance movement in Norway. Was it popular? Was it not popular? It turns out that I thought it was popular because my father and his friends were very much involved with the resistance. But there was a middle ground, and there was also people who viewed the the German occupation as being a good thing. So learning that was very interesting as well.
You mentioned WriterCon a minute ago, which of course made my ears perk up.
Yes.
I think you may have actually attended a retreat at least once, right?
Yes.
How'd that go? This self-serving question, how did that go?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I would recommend and this is not a shameless plug, but it's the truth. I would say that it changed the trajectory of how I wrote, how I approached some of the characters. There was one character in particular that Gramps, who was probably, he was kind of the voice of the people. He was the one. There's always the person in every story that is the truth teller. And so Gramps was he was an interesting character to write, but there was a guy that was in our Derry Hollow writing retreat that said, right. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, that Norway in Norwegian, Bestefar is the name for grandfather, not Gramps. And I went, well, yeah. I mean, I was polite, but I was going, yeah, but he's named Gramps. He really is named Gramps. And then I was like, yeah, but why is he named Gramps? Why? And suddenly this whole extra story about how he had spent time in New York and that Gramps had gone from Norway to the United States and then returned back to go ahead and marry the woman he loved. But there was still this part of him that had the colloquialisms of New York, of Brooklyn. And so they called it Brooklyn, America. He always referred to stuff. And that was in no small part because of going to and getting the feedback that would happen at Derry Hollow. So,
fantastic, which is where we were holding our retreat that year.
Yes.
What about your publisher? Where'd you find the publisher?
I went to OWFI and
another writing conference, right?
Yes, Oklahoma Writers Federation, and had gone ahead and made the pitch, and they went ahead and they said yes. So I was very excited about it, and I've been excited to work with them. And so now the book is coming out at the end of June.
So you had mentioned this is the first book in the series. What's the next book? Are you already?
I'm sorry. Now I must have misspoke. Yeah, this is a standalone.
I might have misheard.
No,
this is fine. A standalone. Okay.
This is a standalone. And so it's really it's a story of friendship over the friendships of these young men and how they when they grow up as well. But I am working on a novel, so it will be I know you're going to probably ask me the question, what am I working on now? But there is a story series that's going to be called the Lakeshore Stories. And I'm working on the first story, which is kind of Gone with the Wind meets The Help. I think that's about as vague as I possibly can get.
Okay. Well, it's exciting to hear that you've got something else going. Well, let me ask this, but because our listeners always like to know what our writers' days look like. What do your writing days look like? What are your drinks that you must have, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I do. I try to go ahead and get up early in the morning. I actually still work, and so I have a full-time job. So what I try to do is I try to get up really super early. For me, it's easier for me. Apparently, I'm a morning person, and the muse talks to me in the morning. So the first thing is that there is a definite large cup of coffee by my side, and I start going ahead and I write. For me, it's kind of like watching a movie, and I'm very visual about that. So when I'm doing dialogue or if I'm writing the story, it's almost like I'm watching a movie, and I can see it unfold. So I go ahead and do that. And then if I have time at lunch, then I will go ahead and I will write I shoot for 500 words. That would be nice. And then once I'm done with that, then I email it to my home address, and then I just dump it in and just kind of continue on. And then, yeah.
That's, and you bring up an important point, Janet, because a lot of writers do have other jobs, and it is interesting how each one finds that special writing time in the midst of already a day of 8 hours of work or whatever the hours are. So I hope that's inspiring our listeners to go, you can still write a whole book and have a full-time job, and you can find your space. So good job on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And sometimes but I think sometimes the muse, she nudges me and says, no, come on. Let's go. I've got something for you to write. And I'm like, okay, all right. So
I love it. I love it. Well, I used to be a night owl writer. And then as I passed 30, I have become a morning writer. My brain doesn't even function after 5, as Bill knows, me trying to form words. Bill, you're a morning writer too, aren't you?
I am.
Books in the morning. Yeah. So I think my brain just is on fire in the morning, and with coffee as well. So,
well, and I also realized that too, that writing, like if I'm giving myself permission to go ahead and know that I'm writing a first draft and just get it finished, and then you can always go back and edit it, and just don't. I do revise somewhat. But I have to kind of slap my hand, because otherwise I'm not going to get the thing done. So it's like, just do it.
One of the hardest things for me to learn is that unpleasant feeling you get when you're writing your first draft and think, this is really awful. It's not just me. It's pretty much everyone in their first draft, isn't it? Then you go back and read it a second time. And although, yes, it's rough, it's not as bad as I remembered usually.
Well, that's what they tell you, to go ahead and put it away for 2 to 3 months. And I don't know how anybody could stand that advice. There's no way. There's absolutely no way.
That's a long time. I'd forget what I had written about. I'd have to start my brain completely over. But I do think, a few days, a week or so would be my comfort level of stepping away, especially if I'm on a deadline. I don't have 2 to 3 months built in for my deadlines.
Right.
So Janet, we always ask this question. Are you a pantser or plotter, or I am going to use the new trendy terms because I actually like them. The architect or the archaeologist. What are you? What on the scale? Where are you?
I would say that I am, because a lot of the stuff that I write actually happened in real life. So I have kind of the beginning, middle, and end. I know how the story begins, and I know how the story ends. That said, there are things that creep in. For example, the novel that I'm working on right now is about a woman who is a landman, which is very much like what I do. And so I'm a mineral manager. And so she has something horrific happen in her life, and her life is completely upended. But as she's flying up to claim her husband's body, she's flying over where she used to work, and she starts recalling things about geology. Now, I knew zero about geology, but have now decided that I needed, if I'm going to write about geology, maybe I should learn a little bit about it. So I went ahead, and I am now become a YouTube aficionado of a guy and started following it. Did the Rocks for Jocks 101, but it's kind of helping me to inform it, because she has a particular way of looking at the world, which I had no idea that she was going to be able to do that. And so that's one of the things that I would say that I am a plotter, but I really, really like the idea of inspiration striking out of the middle of nowhere and just kind of enhancing what I'm writing.
I love it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So
looking back on your road to publication, what do you think is the most helpful piece of advice that you picked up along the way that could help others who are seeking publication?
Get an editor, a really good editor.
Everybody needs an editor.
Everyone
no matter how many
needs an
books
editor. And I thought, because like I said, I was a complete newbie. I had gone through spell check, and I had gone through Grammarly, and by gum, I had the world by the tail. And so I went ahead and I sent it off to an editor, and she came back with the laundry list. Let's just say a long laundry list of things, but it taught me how to go ahead, what my pitfalls were and what I needed to work on and what I got right. That was the beauty of working with her, was that she also encouraged me. She knew that I was a newbie. She knew that I was a debut. And she said, you actually do have something here, but you need a little help in finding the voice and finding it. So get an editor, hire an editor. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it's worth it.
It's an investment in your future. And I know what a lot of people listening are thinking. They're thinking, yeah, sounds good, but where do you find these wonderful editors? Where'd you find yours?
I found mine through a local writing group. I belonged to the Tulsa Night Writers, and she was listed, and I asked around, and she came very highly recommended. And so I talked to her. This was during the pandemic. I actually didn't meet her in person until after the pandemic, but she emailed stuff, and like I said, it was, my manuscript was gone for a month or so, and then it came back, and I was like, oh, I got this. And then I opened it up, and I was horror struck. Like, oh. But she was very, very good and very encouraging. So that is very important.
Well, that's what you need. And everybody knows, I'm going to say, we have many wonderful editors who will be at WriterCon this year.
Yes.
And I personally think that's where you ought to be looking for one. Not you, Janet. You've already got one, but everybody else.
But I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that taking your ego out of it, because this is your baby. I mean, you guys are all writers, and you think you have something. You go back to that gut. There was a reason why you wanted to write it in the first place, and you've gotten it, and then you find out that you feel, oh, well, I know I can do this by myself. And it's very difficult. I think it's a very, very difficult road to hoe. But by doing this, by going ahead and having someone show you how you can make it shine, that was so important. And so I think that don't be afraid to go ahead and ask and see how it can be approved. You might surprise yourself. I was very surprised. I was very, very surprised. So what I sent originally was not what ended up being in the book. And
Yes.
I'm very grateful for that, actually.
Yeah, I felt the same way about my first real editor came after I'd sold the book to Valentine at Random House. But I remember when I got that first manuscript back and it's dripping with red ink. But once I got over my outrage, do they not know how brilliant I am? And sat down and actually read it. I thought, yeah, that is better. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was kind of it. And she was marvelous. She was absolutely marvelous. I had an editor very, very early on who had given me advice on the original manuscript. And then along the way, then I had gone ahead and put it away, and then it got serious. And that was about the time that I went to your thing at Dairy Hollow. And then the whole trajectory of the story changed. Things left, things were created. So I've actually been lucky, very, very lucky to have very talented people around me to go ahead and help with the project. So I'm very excited about it.
Let me just to eliminate any confusion, and of course, mention another one of our programs, that the Dairy Hollow program. That was a lovely writers retreat in Arkansas. We're still doing our retreats, but this year it's going to be in Branson in July. So if anybody's interested, go check that out on the website. Definitely. Janet, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good luck with this first book, okay?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Just a few parting words. Once again, WriterCon is the place to be. September 1st through 4th in Oklahoma City. That's Labor Day weekend, so you've got some time off from work anyway, right? We got more than 60 presenters lined up, agents, publishers, editors, people who work with agents on marketing and PR and a bunch of other stuff. And I can just about guarantee you will learn things you didn't know, but are really glad to know, because it's going to give your writing career a boost. So check out our website, which is writercon.com, and see if this isn't where you want. I mean, I'm going to be there, and Rene's going to be there. So, and Jesse's going to be there, because somebody has to record all this stuff. So come join us Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City. All right. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. I'll see you next time.